2 weeks ago I compared the new Marshall Studio JTM to the Studio Vintage, and for me there was no real winner since both sound good and both do something pretty different. Struggling to decide which one to keep, I wanted to compare it to one of my non-Marshall heads. Here in Europe these amps are great value for money at around 800 bucks, but if you live in the US you have to pay double as much, which could also get you a boutique amp. Something like a Dr. Z. The question is, can a Marshall like this compete with that? These amps are very different circuits. The only thing they have in common is that they share their roots in classic British rock from decades ago. Currently, the Dr. Z is my all-rounder and I want to know how the Marshall Studio JTM stacks up. So let's start off with some cleanish tones. To be clear about one thing, I didn't deliberately dial in both amps to sound similar, I just dialed them in individually how I like them best on their own. And what I currently hear is that the Studio JTM sounds a bit more open, while the Z-Rec Junior sounds a bit more smooth. Both amps live in a bit of a different place in terms of frequency response. The Studio JTM can get a bit more sparkle than the Z-Rec Junior without getting too harsh, but the Z-Rec Junior has a bit more low mids. Next up, P90s and a drive pedal. You can also hear the Z-Rec Junior has a bit of a different gain structure and is a bit more saturated. I'll give both amps a bit more low end and a bit more drive, and I'll play slide with it using my Telecaster Custom. Here the difference gets a bit bigger. The Studio JTM is more jangly, while the Z-Rack Junior gets a bit fuller, fatter and more compressed. And in this instance, I would prefer the Z-Rack Junior, but I'm sure you could dial in the Studio JTM to get closer results. Now let's test a bit of a wider range. I'll use my SG Clean with a bit of tremolo and delay on the neck pickup, and then I'll switch to the bridge pickup and add a drive pedal and lose all the other effects and see how both amps deal with that. With this comparison, I think the Studio JTM reacts a bit more harmonically interesting across the board. But let's get a bit more crazy as I turn on a pitch shifter and a spitty fuzz. Both amps handled that just fine, but most of all it shows that both amps deserve to be credited as amps that take pedals really well. And after all these comparisons, I cannot say that one amp sounds or feels better than the other. Just like last time around, they shine in different situations, albeit in closer proximity this time than when I compared it to the Studio Vintage 2 weeks ago. I think the Marshall can hang with the Dr. Z in that regard. But the Dr. Z is a hand-wired non-PCB amp which is better constructed and easier to repair, and I also think it's a bit more of a unique design than the Studio JTM, which all also have their value to me. So I wouldn't get rid of the Z-Rack Junior in favor of the Studio JTM. But I don't want to get rid of the Studio JTM either, because it's very versatile, it sounds really good, and it feels so nice to play. It's also noteworthy to mention that I've owned the Z-Rack Junior for about 9 months now, so I already got to know that amp, and I have fixed settings for single coils and everything that's not single coils. Also important to mention, usually I use the drive from the amp of the Z-Rack Junior, and I didn't do that in this video to make a fair comparison. This is my second week with the Studio JTM, and I've used it in many different settings with all my guitars and both of my pedal boards, and there are many great sounds in this amp. To me, it is more of a platform, as for real drive sounds I would use a pedal, but that already makes it different from my other amps. To conclude this video, I'm leaning towards keeping the Studio JTM without selling any of my other amps because I feel it's more of an addition rather than a replacement. And if you have to pay more for this amp based on where you live, I think it's still worth it compared to boutique amps based on sound and feel alone at least. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and I'll see you next time.